The wind at Fort Raymond didn't just blow, it judged. It swept across the vast military base like a silent observer, pressing against steel structures, rattling flags, and carrying the distant sound of boots hitting concrete in perfect rhythm. Everything here had order. Everything had discipline. And everything had pride. But pride always cracked first. At precisely 600 hours, a transport helicopter landed on the southern pad. Dust exploded outward as the rotor slowed. Soldiers standing nearby didn't even flinch. They were trained not to react to anything that wasn't an order. But when the rear door opened, eyes still shifted. Because someone new had arrived. A woman stepped out. Second Lieutenant Ava Mitchell. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look impressed by the base, the size, or the attention slowly gathering around her. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag once and started walking. That alone made people notice her more. Not because she was loud, but because she wasn't trying to be seen and still couldn't be ignored. Whispers begin. Is that her? The new intel officer. She looks too calm for a place like this. Ava heard every word. But her expression didn't change. She had learned something early in her career. People don't test your strength, they test your reaction. And she never gave them one. As she crossed the main yard, rows of soldiers were training, running drills, shouting commands, pushing through exhaustion under strict supervision. Yet a few of them slowed just slightly as she passed. Not out of respect, out of curiosity and something darker. Judgment. One soldier near the obstacle course smirked. Bet she won't last a week. Another chuckled. Intelligence officers don't survive here. This isn't a desk job base. Ava didn't even glance in their direction. But she remembered their voices. Inside Fort Raymond, command center. The atmosphere inside headquarters was heavier than outside. Screens lined the walls showing global surveillance feeds, encrypted communication channels, and tactical updates. At the center stood Colonel Grant Holloway, a man built from authority and ego in equal measure. He didn't look up when Ava entered. New intelligence officer, someone announced. Only then did Holloway turn slightly. His eyes scanned her once. Not as a soldier. As a variable. You're late, he said coldly. Ava replied instantly, calm and precise. I arrived at the assigned time, sir. A pause. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. We operate earlier than assigned time here. Ava nodded once. Then I will adjust, sir. No resistance. No emotion. That unsettled him more than defiance would have. Because people who don't react are harder to control. The first dismissal. Colonel Holloway turned away. This is Captain Rhodes, he said. A tall officer stepped forward. Sharp posture, confident stance, cold eyes. Captain Daniel Rhodes. He gave Ava a quick glance. Short. Dismissive. Like evaluating equipment. Hope you can keep up, he said. Ava met his gaze. I don't need to keep up, she replied. I just need to be right. A few nearby officers smirked. Rhodes didn't. He simply said, we'll see. And that was the beginning of their conflict. Not loud. Not dramatic. But dangerous. Because both of them knew. One of them would be proven wrong. And in this base, being wrong was an embarrassment. It was career-ending. The briefing, something is wrong. Later that morning, Ava was called into the main intelligence briefing. The room was filled with senior officers. A digital map glowed in the center, showing multiple red alert zones across operational regions. Colonel Holloway spoke first. We have 3 communication breaches in 2 weeks. He tapped the screen. Supply routes compromised. Another tap. Patrol patterns intercepted. A final tap. Yesterday, a convoy encryption key was used before it was officially issued. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Holloway added, "This is not external interception." That changed the room instantly. Captain Rhodes narrowed his eyes. Ava remained still. Holloway continued, "This is internal compromise." A murmur spread. Someone inside the base was leaking information. Someone they worked with. Someone they trusted. Pressure begins immediately. After the briefing, Ava was assigned directly to Captain Rhodes. No introduction meeting. No adjustment period. Just pressure. Rhodes walked her to a private intelligence office. Glass screens, data feed, secure terminals. He dropped a folder onto the desk. 3 incidents, he said. 2 weeks, no pattern. Ava didn't open it immediately. She looked at the data labels instead. Rhodes noticed. "You see something already." Ava replied softly, "Yes." That annoyed him. "You haven't even read it." "I don't need to read everything," she said. "I need to read what matters." Rhodes crossed his arms. "Then enlighten me." Ava opened the file slowly. Not rushing. Always observing first. Then she spoke. "This isn't random leakage." Rhodes frowned. "We already established that." Ava shook her head. "You established it as a fact. I'm identifying it as a structure." That made him pause. She continued. "Each breach occurs within a specific time window, 48 to 72 hours after command-level meetings." Rhodes narrowed his eyes. "So?" Ava looked at him. "So the leak isn't constant." She zoomed in on timestamps. "It's triggered." That word changed the tone. The hidden pattern. Ava pulled up encrypted logs. Rows of communication data filled the screen. She highlighted sections. Then paused. A faint rhythm appeared. Not obvious. Not visible at first glance. But consistent. Rhodes leaned in slightly now. "What is that?" Ava's voice lowered. "A signal." Rhodes frowned. "A signal." "Yes," she said, "embedded inside routine communication cycles." Rhodes shook his head. "That's not possible. Our encryption filters would catch anything structured." Ava replied instantly. "This isn't structured like code." She zoomed in further. "It's structured like timing." Silence filled the room. Then she said something that made Rhodes stiffen slightly. "Someone is marking information before it becomes classified." Rhodes turned fully toward her now. "That would require internal access." Ava met his eyes. "Yes." A long pause. Then, "And it means the leak isn't outside this base." She tapped the screen once. "It's inside command operations." The first subtle threat. Rhodes stepped closer. "You're making a serious accusation." Ava didn't flinch. "I'm not accusing anyone." She looked at the data again. "I'm following behavior patterns." Rhodes studied her for a moment. Then said quietly, "Be careful what you find here." That wasn't a warning. It was experience speaking. Ava understood that instantly. But she didn't respond. Because she had already seen something else. Something hidden deeper in the logs. Something that didn't belong. And it meant someone had been watching her arrival before she even stepped off the helicopter. End of Part 1, cliffhanger. Ava stared at the final line of encrypted metadata. Her expression changed slightly for the first time. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. She whispered. This was planned before I got here. Rhodes frowned. What was? Ava slowly closed the file and said the words that shifted everything. I wasn't sent here by accident. The words still hung in the air. I wasn't sent here by accident. For a moment, even the monitors in the intelligence office seemed quieter, like the entire system had paused to listen. Captain Rhodes didn't respond immediately. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. And that was worse. Ava Mitchell stood beside the glowing tactical screen, her reflection faintly visible in the glass, calm face, steady posture, eyes locked on something deeper than the data itself. Rhodes finally broke the silence. That's a dangerous thing to say in a place like this. Ava didn't look at him. It's not a statement, she replied. It's a conclusion. Rhodes stepped closer. Based on what? Ava tapped the screen once. Based on timing, access, and behavior. The map flickered slightly as she pulled up encrypted logs again. Rows of communication timestamps appeared. Perfectly clean at first glance. Too clean. Then she highlighted something small. Rhodes frowned. That's nothing. Ava shook her head slightly. No, that's the point. The first crack in the system. She zoomed in. Every breach occurs after internal command synchronization meetings, she said. Rhodes crossed his arms. You already said that. Yes, Ava replied, but look at this layer. She overlaid another data set. Suddenly, faint patterns appeared, subtle delays in encrypted routing updates. Not random. Rhythmic. Controlled. Rhodes leaned in despite himself. What am I looking at? Ava's voice dropped slightly. A signal trigger. Silence. Then Rhodes shook his head. That's impossible. Those systems are isolated. Ava finally turned toward him. They're supposed to be. That single sentence landed heavier than expected. Because in military intelligence, supposed to be never meant are. Elsewhere in the base, a dim corridor beneath Fort Raymond. Restricted access level. A man stood alone in a communications room. Multiple screens surrounded him, each displaying fragments of operational data. His face was partially hidden by the glow. He typed slowly, deliberately, then paused. A small alert appeared on the screen. Anomaly DETCTD, Intel Analysis Behavior Shift. He didn't react immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, as if he had expected this. Then he whispered, So she's awake. He pressed a key. A second message appeared. Initiate Observation Protocol. The screens dimmed. Somewhere deep inside Fort Raymond, something had just shifted. Back in intelligence office, pressure begins. Ava suddenly stepped away from the screen. Rhodes noticed instantly. What is it? Ava didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the room, not the data anymore, but the environment. The vents, the corners, the system indicators. Then she said quietly, This room is being monitored. Rhodes frowned. That's standard. No, Ava said sharply, not standard monitoring. She pointed to a small indicator light above the ceiling panel. It's active listening protocol. Rhodes stiffened slightly. That's restricted to command authorization only. Ava nodded once. Exactly. A pause. Then she added, And I didn't authorize it. That changed everything. First sign of control. Rhodes moved toward the console. Let me check. Before he could finish. Beep. Every monitor in the room flickered once. Then froze. A system-wide override prompt appeared. Access locked, command override active. Rhodes froze. That doesn't happen without kernel authorization. Ava stared at the screen. No, she said quietly. This happens when someone wants us staying exactly where we are. A heavy silence followed. Then the lights in the hallway outside dimmed slightly. Not off, just reduced, like someone had adjusted visibility. Ava turned toward the door. Rhodes noticed. What? Ava didn't blink. They just confirmed something. Rhodes frowned. Confirmed what? Ava spoke slowly. That I'm being evaluated. The hidden test begins. A faint sound echoed outside. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching. Rhodes instinctively reached for his sidearm. Who is that? Ava didn't answer, because she was listening differently. Not to the footsteps. To the pattern. Rhythmic spacing. Controlled pace. Military trained. Familiar. Too familiar. Then she said something that made Rhodes freeze. That's not a breach. Rhodes whispered, then what is it? Ava's eyes stayed fixed on the door. That's a controlled entry. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A pause. Then, knock. Once. Not urgent. Not hesitant. Intentional. Rhodes raised his weapon slightly. Identify yourself, he called out. Silence. Then a voice came through the door. Calm. Familiar. You already know who it is. Rhodes went still. Ava didn't move, because now she knew something else. This wasn't just a leak investigation. It was a test of her presence inside the system. Ava realizes the truth. She took one step forward. Rhodes whispered, "Don't open it." Ava replied softly, "It's already open." Rhodes frowned. What? Ava pointed at the system console. A red indicator blinked once, then stabilized. Remote override. The door lock disengaged silently. It wasn't a question anymore. It was permission. The handle turned. Slowly. Cliffhanger moment. The door began to open. A shadow appeared in the gap. Rhodes raised his weapon fully now. Ava didn't react, because in her mind, everything had already shifted. This wasn't an intrusion. It was confirmation. Someone inside Fort Raymond Command had been waiting for her to notice the pattern. The door opened halfway, and the voice spoke again. Welcome to the real layer of Fort Raymond, Lieutenant Mitchell. Ava's expression didn't change, but her next words did. Then I assume, she said calmly, you're the one I've been tracking. The figure stepped further into the light, and the system alarms finally triggered. Too late. The door stood half open. Cold light from the corridor spilled into the intelligence room, cutting through the dim glow of monitors like a blade. Captain Rhodes didn't move. His weapon was raised, but his instincts were already confused. Because the man standing in the doorway was not a stranger. It was Major Ethan Caldwell, one of the senior operations officers from Fort Raymond Command. And that made everything worse, because officers like him didn't appear in the middle of a covert breach investigation without reason. Not at this hour. Not like this. Not in person. Caldwell stepped inside calmly, as if he owned the room already. His eyes moved first to Rhodes, then to Ava. Slow. Measuring. Like he was confirming something he already knew. Captain, Caldwell said quietly, nodding at Rhodes, lower your weapon. Rhodes didn't obey immediately. Ava didn't react at all. That silence between all three of them felt heavier than any alarm. Finally, Rhodes asked, "Sir, what is this?" Caldwell didn't answer him. Instead, his gaze stayed locked on Ava. "So," he said softly, "you noticed it." Ava's voice was calm. "I noticed enough to come here." A pause. Caldwell smiled faintly. "That's usually how it starts." The room changes shape. Something subtle shifted in the atmosphere. The monitors flickered once, then stabilized. But the system layout had changed. Rhodes noticed it immediately. "That's not our interface," he muttered. Ava stepped closer to the console. He was right. The intelligence system had been reconfigured. Not hacked from outside. Rewritten from inside. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't an intrusion," she said quietly. Caldwell nodded. "No," he replied, "it's not." Rhodes stepped forward now. "Then what the hell is it?" Caldwell finally looked at him. "It's containment." That word hit like a warning shot. Ava didn't look away from the screen. She said calmly, "You've been watching me since I arrived." Caldwell didn't deny it. That was the assignment. Rhodes froze slightly. "Assignment," he repeated. Caldwell turned a little toward him. "You weren't informed because you weren't the subject." A pause. Then he added, "She was." The real purpose revealed. Ava slowly straightened. Her expression stayed controlled, but something sharper formed behind her eyes. "You didn't send me here to investigate leaks," she said. Caldwell nodded once. "No." A pause. "To test me," Ava continued. Caldwell corrected her gently. "To observe you." Silence. Rhodes looked between them now, realization building slowly. Caldwell continued. "Fort Raymond has had a persistent internal compromise, but every time we tried to trace it, the pattern adapted." He stepped closer to the console. "Which means the leak isn't just a person." He looked at Ava again. "It reacts." That changed everything. Ava's voice lowered. "So you introduced a variable." Caldwell nodded. "You." Rhodes turned sharply. "Are you saying she's part of some experiment?" Caldwell answered without hesitation. "She is the experiment." The trap activates. Suddenly, beep. Every screen in the room turned red. A single message appeared across all displays. "Security breach DATCTD. Internal agent compromise." Rhodes stepped back instantly. "What is that?" Caldwell didn't react. Ava stared at the screen. And for the first time, her expression tightened slightly. Not fear. Recognition. Because she understood the structure now. This wasn't an alarm. It was a frame. Ava spoke slowly. "You're not just observing me." Caldwell tilted his head slightly. "No." Ava continued. "You're controlling what the system sees." A pause. Then she turned slightly toward Rhodes. "And what it reports." Rhodes frowned. "What are you saying?" Ava looked back at Caldwell. "They're making me the leak." Silence. That sentence changed the entire room. Psychological pressure begins. Caldwell stepped toward her. Calm. Controlled. "You're intelligent, Lieutenant," he said, "but intelligence without trust becomes dangerous very quickly." Ava didn't respond. He continued. "All system anomalies now root through your access profile." Rhodes stiffened. "That's not possible without full override." Caldwell nodded. "Exactly." A pause. "Which is why it was authorized at the highest level." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. Colonel Holloway. Caldwell didn't confirm or deny. That was answer enough. Rhodes begins to doubt everything. Rhodes lowered his weapon slightly now, confusion creeping in. So what, she's being set up? Caldwell finally looked at him directly. No. A pause. She's being measured. Ava turned slightly toward Rhodes. Don't fall for that distinction, she said quietly. Rhodes frowned. Ava continued. They want me isolated. She pointed at the screen. This system is feeding false correlation, loops into my analysis profile. Rhodes looked at the data. Then back at her. You're saying the system is lying. Ava replied immediately. No. A pause. It's learning what I see and changing what I see back. That was the most dangerous part, because it meant the system wasn't passive. It was adaptive. The first psychological crack. Caldwell watched her carefully, then said, You passed the first stage. Ava didn't react. He continued. Most analysts collapse under conflicting data patterns within hours. You've maintained coherence for significantly longer. Rhodes whispered stages. Caldwell nodded. There are always stages. A pause. And you are now in the second. Ava finally turned fully toward him. And what happens in the second stage? Caldwell smiled faintly. We see if you accuse the system. He stepped closer. Or yourself. Silence dropped hard into the room. That was the real trap. Not data. Not surveillance. Not pressure. It was doubt. System override escalates. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. Emergency tone activated, but distorted. Not a real alarm. A synthetic one. Ava immediately looked at the console. Rhodes stepped back. What now? Ava's voice sharpened slightly. They're simulating a base-wide lockdown. Caldwell nodded. To observe your response. Ava turned sharply. This isn't observation anymore. A pause. This is conditioning. Caldwell didn't deny it. That silence was louder than any confirmation. The twist inside the trap. A new message appeared on screen. Command notice. Lieutenant MITCHELL, transfer approval pending. Rhodes stared at it. A transfer. Ava didn't blink. No. She stepped closer. That's not a transfer. She read further. Then stopped. Her expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not confusion. Focus. Because she saw the real line beneath the system text. Subject reclassification initiated. Caldwell watched her closely. Ava spoke quietly. You're not testing if I can find the leak. A pause. You're testing if I become it. Silence. Rhodes looked between them. What does that mean? Ava didn't answer him immediately. Because she had just realized something worse. The system wasn't just tracking her behavior. It was trying to predict her identity shift under pressure. Final cliffhanger of Part 3. Caldwell stepped back toward the door. You'll understand soon enough, he said calmly. Ava didn't move. But her voice followed him. If I'm the subject. A pause. Then who designed the system watching me? Caldwell stopped at the doorway. He looked back once. And said the final line. You already know the answer to that. The door closed. Lock engaged. Rhodes turned sharply. What did he mean by that? Ava didn't answer immediately. Because on her screen, a new hidden access log had just appeared. One she didn't create. One she didn't authorize. And it was labeled Origin node. MITCHLL file pre-ASSIGND. Ava whispered, I was here before I arrived. The door sealed shut. The silence that followed wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that felt engineered. Captain Rhodes stood frozen near the console, still processing what Major Caldwell had just said before leaving. You already know the answer. Those words didn't leave the room. They stayed inside Ava Mitchell's mind like a locked command. Ava didn't move at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. That new line of data still blinked softly. Origin node. MITCHLL file pre-ASSIGND. Rhodes broke the silence first. This doesn't make sense anymore, he said. None of it does. Ava finally spoke. It does. Rhodes turned toward her. No, it doesn't. You're telling me you were assigned to investigate a leak that's also targeting you before you even arrived. Ava nodded once. Yes. Rhodes shook his head. That's impossible. Ava's voice stayed calm. Not impossible. A pause. Controlled. The system inside the system. Ava stepped closer to the console again. Her fingers moved slowly across the interface. Rhodes watched her carefully now, not as a superior, not as a skeptic, but as someone realizing he had been standing inside something much larger than himself. Ava pulled up hidden system layers. Most of the data was now locked. But not all of it. There was always a gap in control systems. A flaw. Or a door. She whispered. They didn't build a system to catch a leak. Rhodes frowned. Then what did they build? Ava paused. Then said, a system that evolves the definition of the leak. Rhodes didn't understand. Ava turned slightly toward him. They're not tracking a traitor. A pause. They're creating one. That sentence hit harder than anything before. The real revelation begins. Suddenly, the monitors flickered again. But this time, it wasn't an alarm. It was a full system, broadcast activation. Every screen in the intelligence wing lit up. Then the entire Fort Raymond command network joined in. A base-wide override. Rhodes stepped back. What is happening? Ava stared at the screen. They're activating public protocol. Rhodes turned sharply. Public. Ava nodded. Yes. A pause. Everyone is about to see everything. The doors outside began unlocking automatically. Bootsteps echoed in the hallway. People were gathering. Command officers. Analysts. Soldiers. Something was wrong, and everyone knew it. Because alarms weren't sounding. That was the most terrifying part. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled exposure. The main hall activation. Within minutes, Ava and Rhodes were escorted, not forcibly but automatically, into the main command hall. Colonel Holloway stood at the front. Calm. Composed. Waiting. Like he had already predicted everything. Major Caldwell stood near the side. Silent. Watching. The entire hall filled with soldiers. Every screen around them turned on. Then Holloway spoke. Today, he said, we conclude internal validation protocol. A murmur moved through the room. Ava stepped forward slightly. Validation protocol. That wasn't an investigation term. That was a classification test. Holloway continued. We have identified a potential adaptive intelligence anomaly within our system. Rhodes whispered, anomaly. Ava didn't look at him. Because she already understood. She was the anomaly. The frame becomes visible. Holloway gestured toward the main screen. Ava's entire analysis history appeared. Every decision she made, every pattern she identified, every conclusion she reached, all displayed publicly. But something was wrong. Rhodes noticed it first. These logs, they're altered. Ava nodded slightly. Yes. She stepped forward. They've been rewritten. Holloway didn't deny it. Instead, he said, they have been interpreted. A pause. Then he added, by the system designed to evaluate you. Ava turned toward him. You mean the system designed to frame me? The hall went silent. Holloway's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Interest. The final test begins. Holloway spoke again. Lieutenant Mitchell, your analysis identified internal leakage patterns that do not exist in verified operational data. Ava responded immediately. They exist. Holloway nodded. In your interpretation. A pause. Or your projection. That word mattered. Projection. Because now the system wasn't accusing her of error. It was accusing her of distortion. Rhodes stepped forward slightly. This is wrong, he said. She followed real data. A voice from the side interrupted. Major Caldwell. Or, he said calmly, she constructed meaning from noise. Ava turned slightly toward him. No. A pause. I constructed meaning from intent. That changed the tone of the room. Because intent couldn't be proven. But it could be inferred. And inference was dangerous. The real trap revealed. Holloway stepped forward. Let me clarify, he said. He pointed at the screen. This system does not track truth. A pause. It tracks interpretation under pressure. Ava narrowed her eyes slightly. Rhodes whispered, that's not intelligence work, that's psychological profiling. Ava nodded. Yes. Holloway continued. We introduced controlled inconsistencies into your dataset to observe your reconstruction behavior. A pause. To determine whether you stabilize truth or reshape it. Silence dropped hard. Ava finally understood the full structure. This wasn't about leaks. It was about her cognitive response to uncertainty. Rhodes whispered. They built a test around you. Ava replied softly. No. A pause. They built a test that needed me to believe I was inside it. The moment everything breaks. Ava stepped forward, closer to the central screen. Her reflection appeared across all monitors. Calm face. Controlled posture. But now the entire base was watching her. Every soldier. Every officer. Every command node. Holloway spoke. Lieutenant Mitchell, final evaluation point. A pause. Are you the analyst or the source of deviation? That was the final question. The entire system waited for her response. Rhodes looked at her. Not as a captain. Not as a skeptic. But as someone who finally understood what she was facing. Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then opened them. And said, You've been asking the wrong question from the beginning. Silence. She continued. You think you're testing whether I can identify the leak. A pause. But the real test was whether I could identify the observer behind the system. She turned slightly toward Caldwell. Then back to Holloway. And I did. The room tightened instantly. The exposure. Ava stepped toward the central console. Her fingers moved quickly. Rhodes watched in shock. What are you doing? Ava replied. Ending the loop. She accessed a hidden layer inside the system. Not command level, not analyst level. Something deeper. A root observation node. Screens flickered violently. Holloway's expression finally changed. Stop her. But it was too late. Ava activated the final override. And suddenly, every screen in Fort Raymond displayed one line. System design origin, internal command authorization. Rhodes froze. That means Ava finished it. This system was built by your own command structure. Silence. Then she added, and the leak you've been chasing. A pause. Was never information leaving the system. She looked directly at Holloway. It was information being seeded into it. The truth collapsed the room. The final reveal. A voice came through the speakers. Not Holloway. Not Caldwell. An unseen authority channel. Calm. Controlled. Familiar. Conclusion accepted. Ava looked up slightly. Rhodes whispered, "Who is that?" Ava already knew, because she had seen the pattern long before anyone else. The voice continued. Lieutenant Mitchell has successfully identified system recursion behavior and observer feedback contamination. A pause. Evaluation complete. Holloway stood still. For the first time. No command. No control. Just silence. The voice concluded. Assignment status confirmed. Ava exhaled slowly. Rhodes turned toward her. What does that mean? Ava finally looked at him. It means. A pause. I wasn't placed here to find a secret. She looked at the entire room. I was placed here to prove the system could be exposed. Final ending scene. The screen slowly powered down. The tension dissolved, but not the consequences. Soldiers began murmuring. Officers exchanged looks. Everything had changed. Holloway stepped back slightly. Caldwell watched Ava without expression. Rhodes stood beside her in silence. Ava picked up her jacket. No celebration. No dramatic reaction. Just clarity. Before leaving, she said quietly, "You didn't lose control of your system." A pause. You just learned it was never fully yours. She turned and walked out. Rhodes followed after a moment. And behind them, Fort Raymond remained silent for the first time in days. Not because the secret was gone, but because it had finally been seen.